Tiffany, this was awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, guys. Thanks.
John Casman is here, ladies and gentlemen, live from Chicago. He's taking time away from the event he's out there doing. I mean, are you going to give me opportunity to bring you in properly? We've done some production, so
Yeah,
if you
man.
turn your
I haven't
camera
said
off,
anything. So
if you turn your camera off, we'll bring you in properly with this amazing video that our team has put together. And the next voice you'll hear is my man John Casman.
great stuff, man. Love it. Hey, well, good morning to everyone. I am excited to be here. This is the third time I've been invited to speak at the Mid Atlantic Multifamily Investing Summit. And I got to tell you, I'm happy to come back. And Jerome is someone who I've been able to watch grow. And it's great that I'm here talking about branding through thought leadership because that's something I've watched Jerome do really well. It's been an important aspect of my growth. And it's one of those things that no matter where you are today, as far as your connections, what you have in your bank account, you can always grow and compound as a multifamily investor by building strong relationships. So, we're going to talk about that a little bit. So, first and foremost, for anyone who is listening, if you are already active on social media, if you have a podcast, if you have a blog, if you're doing any sort of thought leadership content right now, can you just put a TL in the chat box so I can know how many people are actively kind of building their thought leadership platforms? My man Jeremy, of course, Lawrence, Nicole, okay. Okay. All right. Seeing a few names in here. All right, excellent. All right, so a handful of folks are active. If you are interested in building a thought leadership platform but haven't done it yet, maybe you have some specific questions or don't know where to start, put a Q in the chat box. So you're interested in doing more, but not really comfortable or don't know where to start. Put a Q in the chat box so I can know where we're at here. All right, Sharon, Ron, Camilla. Okay, excellent. All right, you all keep doing that. I'm going to start by introducing myself. So, my name is John Casman. I am based in Cincinnati, Ohio. I lived in Chicago for the last 8 years. And part of the reason I'm here right now is I'm a part of a great organization called Search for Water. And tonight is our annual gala. And we talk about branding. I think a lot of people go into logos and colors and commercials and all of that kind of stuff. But that's not really what branding is about. Let me give you an example. I'm pretty sure everyone here knows Michael Jordan, right? So, Michael Jordan, back in 1984, he had an opportunity to sign a shoe deal. And he was looking at going with Converse, he was looking at Adidas, and he was looking at Nike. And Nike was not the Nike we know at this time. Converse was the king. Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, all the great NBA athletes, Dr. J, they all wore Converse shoes. So when Michael Jordan was going through this process, he was leaning more towards Converse. But Nike did some things to persuade him to come on board. And now Nike is the biggest athletic shoe brand in the world. And the Air Jordan is the number one shoe that people recognize. And branding had a lot to do with that because he helped build Nike in the same way Nike helped make, Jordan kind of this big, huge brand. And I'm here in Chicago, so I completely understand and see it all the time. One of the things that's important to understand is they work hand in hand together, the product and the brand. It's not necessarily the same thing. I'll give you another example. Paris Hilton has a show on Netflix about how terrible of a cook she is. Now, this is a woman who has built a brand over time, really demonstrating kind of this rich, ditzy blonde character that she has played and played magnificently for a couple of decades. Paris is actually really intelligent, but she has known how to take this brand, this perception, capitalize it, and create content based on that. So when we talk about branding, it's not really about your products. It's not even about what you say. Branding is what other people think of you and your brands and your products. So when you think of branding, understand that it's not about you, it's about them. Okay. I spent 15 years in corporate America doing marketing and advertising for brands like Nike, like Coors Light, Mountain Dew. I worked at General Motors, Buick. I was on the Pontiac brand, for any of y'all who remember Pontiac cars. So I spent a lot of time doing marketing. And marketing for brands always made sense to me. But when I went into real estate and I was building up my own portfolio and I was trying to raise money for deals, I had a mentor who told me about building a thought leadership platform. And the thing that I struggled with was, how do I now put myself in that position? Because it was easy for me to look at what Mountain Dew was doing or Nike was doing and break down the opportunities, understand what competitors are doing, what messages are out there, who's our audience. That was easy. I've been doing that for 15 years. But when you're doing that for yourself and you're the product and you're the service and you are the one you've got to go out there and talk about and present, it becomes a little harder. So I think one of the main things you want to do when you are looking to kind of create branding through thought leadership is don't worry so much about what other people are going to say. You can't control that. Okay. You cannot control that aspect of it. What you can do is you can show up, you can add value, and you can help people in the way they need help. If you are listening to people, if you're paying attention to the challenges other people are facing in their business, in their lives, and what they're trying to overcome, and if you can be the solution, if you can help educate people on how to overcome those challenges, you will build a powerful brand. Because if you're able to help someone, they're going to share that. Just like if you go back to the shoe example, if someone has a great experience with a product, whether it be a shoe, whether it be anything, you'll share that experience with other people. And social media makes it so easy for people to share those great experiences now. If you're able to help someone, if you're able to give them answers to a question, if you're able to help them get started in investing, they will refer people to you. They will tell you, hey, check out my friend John. He did XYZ, or he helped me figure this out. Check out Jerome's event. It's a great event. Met some great people there. That's how the branding starts to develop. Okay. Now, when you think of thought leadership, one of the challenges people have is the imposter syndrome. Maybe you haven't developed enough to be the expert. Who am I to educate people on how to invest in real estate, how to buy multifamily? Has anybody ever thought that? Has anybody ever thought about that if you are either creating content right now or you are interested in creating content? Is that a thought or something that has held you back? Yeah, I'm seeing a few people come in here. It's an important thing. And it's real. It's real, especially when you see these super intelligent individuals who have these massive portfolios and they're explaining to people how to invest. It can be challenging for you to come out and try to compete with those people. You know, I'll be honest with you. You're not going to out Rock Khalif. It ain't happening. All right. He's got a team of people, experts, content creators. So if that's your goal and your vision, you're setting yourself up for failure. But that's not the goal of thought leadership. And when I was looking to launch my podcast, as a matter of fact, before I launched my podcast, I remember sitting down with my mentor and sitting down with a small group of people. And I first launched a blog, and my blog sucked. It was awful. I'm a good writer, so the content was good, but it sucked for a number of reasons. One, I didn't know what to talk about. So my blogs went from whatever random thought I had on a Tuesday, I just wrote it out and boom. But there was no strategy behind my blog. It didn't grow. People didn't read it. It just wasn't a very good blog. The other thing was I was super inconsistent. The blog came out whenever I got inspired. So it wasn't really good content. It didn't really give a good experience for people. And I knew I would never be able to grow writing the blog the way I was writing. So I started to think about a podcast. And this is back in 2017, I believe. So I went to a conference and I met a few other podcasters and I had a chance to talk to them. And I knew them, I mean, I felt like, oh, I've been listening to this guy's show. I know this guy. So I went up, I said, hi. And the guy looked at me and said, who are you? And I was like, damn, I guess you wouldn't know who I am at all, right? I'm being real weird about this. So I introduced myself. I cooled down after that, right? So I sat down, introduced myself, and a little bit later, I caught him at the bar. We had a drink, and I asked him, I said, "Hey, I've been listening to your show, great stuff. I was doing a blog, but it's not really working for me, and I'm trying to figure out, maybe I should do a podcast. But I feel like the world doesn't need another podcast. This is 2017, by the way. So I'm saying I don't think the world needs another real estate podcast. And we talked about it. And he said, you know what, you're right. I was like, well, damn, he just shot my dreams down real quick. And he said, the world may not need another real estate podcast, but the people in your circle do, because they need to hear from you, right? They don't know me, and I could be anybody to them. But the people your family, your friends, colleagues, former colleagues, those are the people who need to hear from you. And if you're looking at doing a thought leadership platform, you have to start with the people in your circle and in your community that you can touch. What do they need to know about working with you? What do they need to know about investing? How can you create value for those individuals? And when you think about it from that standpoint, you're no longer worried about building a podcast or a thought leadership platform that gets millions of views or millions of downloads. If you get 10, but it's the right 10, and you can make an impact on someone's life, and you can move them from where they're at today, trying to figure out how to make an extra $1,000 a month, to having a blueprint of making that $1,000 a month, to maybe even investing with you. That is success. It's not about downloads. It's not about views. It's not about how many people you touch. It's about the impact. And when I go on social media and I see people with 10,000, 20,000 followers, 30,000 followers, but they get no engagement, that's all fluff. Don't get caught up in the numbers. Those are what we call vanity metrics. It makes you feel good to see 1 million people or 100,000 people engaging with your content. It makes you feel good. It might make you feel like you're doing something. But that ain't shit. Sorry to swear. I've been working on that. But it's nothing. It's nothing. Okay. And the reason I say it's nothing is those metrics don't impact business. Real numbers that impact business have to do with the way you make people feel. If you touch someone, if you inspire someone, there's a real engagement, there's a real exchange that takes place. So when you are creating content and you're trying to be a thought leader, it's not about being profound. It's not about saying something no one has ever thought of. It's not about coming up with the best content that's ever been created. It's about helping people. It's about helping people get from where they're at right now to where they want to be. And if you can show up consistently, if people can rely on you, you can build an amazing platform. Okay. So I want to give you an example of that with the podcast. When I launched my show, podcast was called Target Market Insights, the Multifamily Marketing Show. And when I launched that podcast, I launched it with a very specific vision. And that vision was to learn how the best investors around the country were finding the best markets for investments. The challenge that I had was I was living here in Chicago and I was starting to look to invest in other markets, but I didn't know what metrics to look at. The people I were talking to were investing in Texas, and Texas real estate was way different than Chicago real estate, which was way different than other Midwest markets. So the things that I had used in my own investing were no longer applicable when I looked in these other markets. And I wanted to understand what metrics people used. How do you identify a growing neighborhood? How do you actually create a repeatable methodology for growth? And doing this podcast allowed me to ask the questions I wanted to ask to gain the insights that I was looking to gain for my own selfish reasons, first and foremost. But it also allowed me to share that with other people. There are a lot of benefits of creating a thought leadership platform. One of them was serving my own business needs. The other, and that when I say business needs, I mean my knowledge, the information that I was looking to get for myself. The second thing was it gave me the opportunity to build a network, to connect with other people who otherwise probably wouldn't give me that time of day. When you talk about people who have different coaching programs and other things like that, these people will not give you the time of day unless they see the exchange of value. But if you have a thought leadership platform and you have an opportunity to give a stage for others, that's where you can extract value for both yourself and for the people in your audience. I remember the when I hired my first real estate coach, one of the things that made me feel comfortable with that coach is that they had a podcast and they had interviewed these big name celebrities that I knew, the Barbara Corcorans and the Robert Kiyosaki's and these big names. And I was like, man, if you could get these people on your show, you must at least have some credibility. And that's the thing about branding. When you have a chance to connect with other people, they lend a little bit of that credibility to you. Going back to Nike and Jordan, that's exactly what happened with Nike. As Jordan became the quintessential star of the NBA, that star power leaned itself to Nike, and Nike was able to borrow that, and it helped elevate it above Adidas, above Converse. And that partnership really allowed both of those brands to flourish. And in the same way, you have a thought leadership platform, you can try to launch it by yourself. But if you have something where you can bring on guests and you can borrow a little bit of their credibility, every time you do it, you move a little higher up, a little higher up, a little higher up. So that whole notion of feeling like an imposter and feeling like you don't know what to say, you alleviate so much of that because you can be honest and true and say, hey, I'm a newer investor. Here's where I'm at in my journey. But I'm going to connect with other people who are further along in their journeys, and we're going to get insights on how to make the next steps. Okay. So, branding through thought leadership is key. And there are a lot of ways to do that where you're not forced to carry all the weight on your shoulders. One of the things that I do is I work with clients who are looking to grow and scale from a marketing standpoint. And I'm a firm believer that marketing is the key growth driver for any business. And it took a while for me to realize that real estate was no different. And this thing we're doing with multifamily investing is no different. Whether you're looking at JV deals, whether you're looking to syndicate deals, ultimately you're going to need to know how to position yourself in the marketplace. When you're talking to brokers, when you're talking to investors, when you're talking to anyone in your network, they need to understand the value you bring to the table. So the more you understand that, the more you can get people comfortable with doing business with you before you even have a conversation with them, the easier it's going to be to grow. There's a saying about celebrity. And if you can create a brand, if you can build an audience, you have so many options to grow and scale from there. So I think no matter what you're doing, you are building a brand, whether you know it or not. Because a brand isn't about you. It's not about you deciding to pick a company name and a logo and the colors and all that. If you're telling people you're investing in real estate, well, how comfortable are they going to see you as a real estate investor? How trustworthy do they view you right now as a real estate investor? Are they ready to invest with you? all of that's a continuum, it's a scale. How people view you is your brand. And wherever you're at today does not have to be where you end up. Lots of people have developed their brand. They have taken steps to move from where they're at to being able to attract capital almost automatically based on the messages they put out by, the energy they put out. And that's something that you can absolutely do, but you have to be mindful and you have to have a plan and a strategy to be able to do that. And thought leadership is a great way to do it. We talk about podcasts, blogs, video, social media. There are a lot of different ways to go out there and build. It really comes down to who do you want to talk to? What do they need from you? And how can you convey that in a simple, reliable way that gets them from where they're at today to where they want to be? Okay. The more you understand that, the easier it is to build a very powerful brand. Jerome, I want to take some questions. Is that cool to open up for a little Q&A? All right. Nicole says, how did you get experienced guests to agree to be on your podcast when you were just starting out and had little to no viewers and downloads? Hey, powerful question, and probably one of the main questions that stops someone from getting started. Okay. Um, I want to back up a little bit and I want to talk about the word value. Okay. There's a value exchange that takes place whenever you have a platform. I don't know how many people were here yesterday and heard, I believe his name was Anthony Trucks, I believe was his name. If you heard Mr. Trucks speak, can you just put a T in the chat box real quick? Man, listen, dude dropped some fire. Like I was driving, I wish I could take notes. Um, but I was just like, man, he just dropped so many gems. It was just like crazy. And the reason I bring it up is when they first started, Jerome said, "Hey, I reached out to this guy, and I wanted him to be a part of this event. He gets paid five figures to speak. And the day I drop my podcast episode, this dude's on Good Morning America, right?" Now, how did Jerome get him to speak? How did he get him to come to this event? Well, he provided a platform and a stage. And the value exchange was, hey, it's not necessarily monetary. And, we have an audience, but I want you to come and be a part of this. For podcast guests, if you don't have an audience just yet, part of what you want to do is build that audience. You have to build the audience, you have to create the premise. But you start off with guests who you have some connection to. That's the easiest thing to do. But the more you can demonstrate the expectation, the easier it's going to be to get guests. The reality is, it's not that difficult to get some of the top guests you're thinking of. If you're trying to get authors and public speakers and national folks, that could be a little more difficult if you have no history. But most real estate investors, absolutely. I've done podcasts where I'm pretty confident no one's ever listened to that episode. And most of us will because we don't know. And we're not going to sit around and say, well, how many listeners do you have? Well, I only do podcasts that have at least this minimum listeners. Most people will because it provides us a couple of things. One, podcasts are not just about the audience, it's about this. If you and I are having a conversation, you and I are building relationship. You and I have a chance to develop and scale a relationship and figure out where things may go, regardless of what happens with that actual episode. So that interaction has value. Second, again, it doesn't mean that you have to have 1,000 downloads. I've done episodes where I know the listening audience was small, but I've received investors and I've received inquiries of how to do business based on that small audience because it only takes a couple of people. So there's value there. Most people understand that there's value in having those conversations. So it's pretty easy. One of the things you want to do though is be professional. You want to make sure that as you reach out, you are positioning yourself as someone who's professional. you're serious to this, and you're committed. If you haven't done any podcast episodes, you need to demonstrate a clear vision for your podcast. Because the thing that people don't like is to be a guest on your podcast, I interview, and you either never run the show or you quit your show after just a couple of episodes. So you want to demonstrate that you're not going to waste people's time by doing the episode. The more professional you can be in your vision for the podcast, what your rollout plan is, how many episodes you have recorded, the easier it's going to be to get those guests. All right. I saw a few more questions here. Let's see here. Yeah, Nicole, when you're ready to launch the show, it sounds like Jerome's signing up to be your first guest. I'll happily be number two. um, Tamika, you asked about expectation. I don't know when I said that, so you're going to have to clarify there. Dan Herford in the house to be, my man. It's good to see you as well, man. He said, what are you doing to promote your podcast? Hey, that's a great question. Podcast promotion is one of the most challenging things that's out there. Unlike blogs or social media where it's much easier to push it out there to other people, podcasts are hard because you have to take people from whatever medium they're in and then drive them over to podcasts, which is still relatively new. A lot of people still don't get podcasts. My dad might see me doing a video on Facebook and he's like, oh, I caught your podcast. I'm like, no, you caught a Facebook video that I did from an event. You didn't see the podcast, right? But there are a couple of things, and I will tell you the most effective thing is, and it's the same thing I'll tell you with real estate investors. You want to minimize the conversion funnel. So, if with real estate, people who understand real estate are going to be easier to teach or educate about multifamily investing or passive investing. They've already made the decision that they get real estate. With podcasts, people who already listen to podcasts are going to be much easier to convert as podcast listeners than someone who doesn't listen to podcasts. So when I'm thinking about promotions and growing the podcast, keep it in that world. Yes, you want to use social media and other things to try to drive new listeners in there, but it's more challenging for those people. It just is challenging for them to go. I mean, if they literally don't know what a podcast is, you might have to tell them where the podcast app is, how to search for it. You know what I mean? Like there's a whole lot of steps involved there versus someone who's already listened to podcasts, and they just need to know your show exists. That's a quick two-step thing. Um, Lawrence is asking about meetups. Does that strategy also work for virtual meetups? I think with virtual meetups it's a little different because people understand meetups and people have gotten way more comfortable with Zoom over the last year and a half. So with that, yes, you want the attendees, but I think you all are missing the more important question here. Remember what I told you about vanity metrics. I'm giving y'all something very powerful here, so I hope y'all are paying attention. Don't get caught up in the vanity metrics because what we're starting to do now in the conversation is we're chasing numbers. Okay, when you start chasing numbers to grow, you can waste a lot of time. Okay, the important thing is understanding where your audience is and engaging with those individuals because you can have 1,000 people attend your virtual meetup. The question you have to ask yourself after that is, was it a success? And that depends on your success metrics. If you're using vanity metrics and you got 1,000 people to show up, then cool, good for you. But if it doesn't change your business in any way, then you're not doing it right.
Pregnant pause. So true, man. I think and I've seen it and I've chased it before too. Like, it's like, oh, how big is it? How big is it? It's about impact, right? It's about how are you moving the needle, and just being popular isn't actually a thing. So, John, I appreciate it. Appreciate you making a little bit of time in your schedule for us. Next go around in February, I'm going to ask the same thing of you. So, until the next episode, my brother, we'll talk soon.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Hey, thank you for having me on. It's great to see everyone on here and appreciate you bringing me back onto the event.
Sure, man. Thank you.